That's my life's work. If you look inside my brain, it's filled with software and, you know, the magic of software and a belief in software. And, you know, that's not going to change.
I grew up fairly middle class, lower middle class, and I never really cared much about money. And I sort of look at us as two of the luckiest guys on the planet because we found what we loved to do, and we were at the right place at the right time. It's hard to be happier than that. I think the world's a better place because Bill realized that his goal isn't to be the richest guy in the cemetery.
The way he does things, it's just different. And, you know, I think it's magical.
Essa conversa entre Bill Gates e Steve Jobs acontece no segundo semestre de 2007. O Jobs estava de volta à Apple fazia 10 anos, mais ou menos, e o Gates estava a 1 ano de se aposentar definitivamente e ir para a filantropia. Os dois já eram empresários de notado sucesso, a Apple ainda não era maior que a Microsoft. A relação deles tinha sido sempre uma relação meio áspera, um às vezes precisava do outro, isso aconteceu em vários momentos. Todo mundo queria ver esse encontro. Bill Gates é o sujeito que inventou a indústria do software. E de certa forma, Steve Jobs, junto com o sócio dele, Steve Wozniak, são os dois caras que inventaram a indústria do computador pessoal. O computador pessoal só faz sentido se você tem programas, e programas, evidentemente, só fazem sentido se pessoas estão comprando computadores. E, de repente, você tem esses dois sujeitos, é claro que outras pessoas contribuíram, mas, de repente, você tem esses dois sujeitos que representam tanto e que, nesse momento, em 2007, já estavam no pico das suas carreiras, ainda extremamente produtivos. De repente, vocês têm os dois se encontrando com tanta história para contar, com tantas brigas nos seus passados. Como é que eles vão reagir? Estava todo mundo muito ansioso para ver a entrevista. E eu acho que a maior surpresa para todos os observadores é que eles se trataram bem, eles estavam nostálgicos, eles estavam gostando de ter aquela conversa, quase que uma conversa informal mesmo, entre duas pessoas que se conhecem há muito e estão falando sobre o passado.
Let's get started. I wanted to ask, there's been a lot of like mano a mano catfight kind of thing in a lot of the blogs and the press and stuff like that. And we wanted to, the first question I was interested in asking is what you think each has contributed to the computer and technology industry, starting with you, Steve, for Bill, and vice versa.
Well, you know, Bill built the first software company in the industry. And I think he built the first software company before anybody really in our industry knew what a software company was, except for these guys. And that was huge. That was really huge. And the business model that they ended up pursuing turned out to be the one that worked really well, you know, for the industry. Mm-hmm. So I think, but the biggest thing was Bill was really focused on software before almost anybody else had a clue that it was really the software. That's what I see. I mean, a lot of other things you could say, but that's the high order bit. And I think building a company is really hard. And it requires your greatest persuasive abilities to hire the best people you can and keep them at your company and keep them working, you know, doing the best work of their lives, hopefully. And Bill's been able to stay with it for all these years. So,
Bill, how about the contribution of Steve and Apple?
Well, first I want to clarify, I'm not fake Steve Jobs. You know, what Steve's done is quite phenomenal. You know, if you look back to 1977, that Apple II computer, the idea that it would be a mass market machine, you know, the bet that was made there by Apple uniquely, there were other people with products, but the idea that this could be an incredible, empowering phenomena, Apple pursued that dream. You know, then one of the most fun things we did was the Macintosh, and that was so risky. You know, people may not remember that Apple really bet the company. Lisa hadn't done that well, and you know, some people were saying, okay, that general approach wasn't good. But the team that Steve built, even within the company, to pursue that even some days it felt a little ahead of its time. Steve gave a speech once, which is one of my favorites, where he talked about, in a certain sense, we build the products that we want to use ourselves. And so he's really pursued that with incredible taste and elegance that has had a huge impact on the industry. And his ability to always come around and figure out where that next bet should be has been phenomenal. Apple literally was failing when Steve went back and reinfused the innovation and risk-taking that have been phenomenal. So the industry's benefited immensely from his work. We've both been lucky to be part of it, but I'd say he's contributed as much as anyone.
We've also both been incredibly lucky to have had great partners that we started the companies with, and we've attracted great people. I mean, so everything that's been done at Microsoft and at Apple has been done by just remarkable people, none of which are sitting up here, today.
I know that you started Microsoft prior to 1977. I think Apple started the year before in 76. Microsoft in
74 was when we started writing
75.
the basic. And then, then we did shipped the basic in 75.
Okay. Most people, some people here, but I don't think most people know that there was actually some Microsoft software in that Apple II computer. Do you want to talk about what happened there, how that occurred?
Yeah, there'd been the Altair and a few other companies, actually about 24, that had done various machines. But the 77 group included the PET, TRS-80,
Commodore.
and Commodore PET, TRS-80, and the Apple II. The original Apple II BASIC, the integer BASIC, we had nothing to do with. But then there was a floating point one where, and I mostly worked with Woz on that.
Let me tell this story. So Woz, my partner, we started out with this guy named Steve Wozniak, brilliant, brilliant guy. He writes this BASIC that is like the best BASIC on the planet. It does stuff that no other BASIC's ever done. You don't have to run it to find your error messages. It finds them when you type it in and stuff. It's perfect in every way, except for one thing, which is it's just fixed point, right? It's not floating point. And so we're getting a lot of input that people want this BASIC to be floating point. And like we're begging Woz, please, please make this floating point.
Who's we? How many people are in Apple?
Well, me. Yeah. We're begging Woz to make this floating point. And he just never does it, and he wrote it by hand on paper. I mean, he didn't have an assembler or anything to write it with. It was all just written on paper, and he'd type it in. He just never got around to making a floating point. Why? Well, this is one of the mysteries of life. I don't know, but he never did.
Se você perguntasse a alguém na indústria da computação no início dos anos 70 se alguém teria um computador em casa, iam, na maioria dos casos, receber você como alguém falando de ficção científica. Então tem esse grupo no norte da Califórnia, no Vale do Silício, que começa a trocar receitas de como montar um computador. E o Woz e o Jobs, que fundam a Apple, estão entre essas primeiras pessoas. E eles são os primeiros, a Apple é a primeira a fazer um computador que não era apenas um projeto de como você comprar peças e montar um computador em casa. O Apple II, que é de 77, 78, é um computador que vem numa caixa de plástico, tem monitor, tem teclado, e ele roda alguma coisa. De repente, um computador é um produto de consumo. Ao mesmo tempo, em Seattle, no estado de Washington, um pouquinho só ao norte, o Bill Gates, junto com Paul Allen, seu sócio na fundação da Microsoft, começa a desenvolver programas que rodam nesses vários computadores que estão nascendo na Califórnia. E os primeiros programas são, na verdade, linguagens de programação. O BASIC, básico mesmo em português, é essa linguagem mais simples. Na verdade, esses primeiros computadores pessoais não passam mais do que calculadoras programáveis. Você tinha que fazer o programa. E a Microsoft começa a estourar dessa forma. Se alguém pode te vender um computador, alguém também pode vender para você um software que te permite fazer o que você quiser com o computador. Ou ao menos o que você quer nos limites de finais dos anos 70.
Microsoft had this very popular, really good floating point BASIC that we ended up going to them and saying, help.
And how much was I think you were telling us earlier?
That was $31,000.
That Apple paid you for that.
The floating point BASIC. And I flew out to Apple. I spent 2 days there getting the cassette. The cassette tapes were the main ways that people stored things at the time.
Right.
And, that was fun. I think the most fun is later when we worked together.
Well,
on the
what was the most
Macintosh.
fun? Tell the story about the most fun that was later.
Well, Steve can probably start it better. The team that was assembled there to do the Macintosh was a very committed team. And there was an equivalent team on our side that just got totally focused on this activity. Jeff Harbers, a lot of incredible people. And we really had bet our future because on the Macintosh being successful, and then hopefully graphics interface in general being successful, but first and foremost, the thing that would popularize that being the Macintosh. And so we were working together, the schedules were uncertain, the quality was uncertain, the price. When Steve first came up, it was going to be a lot cheaper computer than it ended up being, but that was fine.
So you worked in both places, in both?
Well, we were in Seattle, and we fly down there.
But Microsoft, if I remember correctly, from what I read, wasn't Microsoft one of the few companies that were allowed to even have a prototype of the Mac at the time?
Well, what's interesting, what's hard to remember now is that Microsoft wasn't in the applications business then. They took a big bet on the Mac because this is how they got into the apps business. I mean, Lotus dominated the apps business on the PC back then.
Right, we had done just Multiplan,
Yeah.
which was a hit on the Apple II. And then Mitch did an incredible job betting on the IBM PC, and 123 came in and ruled that part of the business. So the question was, what was the next paradigm shift that would allow for an entry? WordPerfect, we had Word, but WordPerfect was by far the strongest in word processing, DBase, and database.
Well, you said you had decided that it was destructive to have this competition with Microsoft. Now, obviously, Apple was in a lot of trouble, and I presume that there was some tactical or strategic reason for that, as well as just wanting to be a nice guy, right? I mean,
Apple was in very serious trouble, and what was really clear was that if the game was a zero-sum game where for Apple to win, Microsoft had to lose, then Apple was going to lose. But a lot of people's heads were still in that place.
Why was that from your perspective?
Well, a lot of people's heads were in that place at Apple, and even in the customer base, because Apple had invented a lot of this stuff, and Microsoft was being successful, and Apple wasn't, and there was jealousy and this and that. There was just a lot of reasons for it that don't matter. But the net result of it was there were too many people at Apple and in the Apple ecosystem playing the game of, for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose. And it was clear that you didn't have to play that game, because Apple wasn't going to beat Microsoft. Apple didn't have to beat Microsoft. Apple had to remember who Apple was, because it had forgotten who Apple was. And so to me, it was pretty essential to break that paradigm. And it was also important that Microsoft was the biggest software developer outside of Apple developing for the Mac. And so it was just crazy what was happening at that time. And Apple was very weak. And so I called Bill up and we tried to patch things up.
Então, de repente, em 97, os interesses desses dois sujeitos que brigaram por tanto tempo confluem. Confluem por quê? Primeiro, Bill Gates precisa provar para o governo americano que ele não é um monopólio. Ou seja, que existe um concorrente no mercado. E existe. O Macintosh da Apple. Então, Bill Gates precisa que a Apple não quebre. Por outro lado, a Apple está quebrando. O CEO da Apple, o presidente da Apple, acaba de ser demitido, Jobs está no lugar dele e ele precisa dar algum tipo de sinal para o mercado de que a Apple consegue sobreviver. Como que a Apple consegue sobreviver? Se uma grande empresa, se o homem mais rico do mundo se compromete em escrever programas para a Apple e mais do que isso, investir. Então, o próprio Gates investe $100 mil na Apple. Em 97, eles fazem esse acordo, é um acordo que ninguém esperava, e esse acordo é anunciado, o investimento da Apple, o investimento da Microsoft, o compromisso da Microsoft em desenvolver programas para a Apple. De repente, os dois interesses confluem, é sobre isso que o Jobs está falando agora.
And since that time, we've had a team that's fairly dedicated to doing the Mac applications, and they've always been treated kind of in a unique way so that they can have a pretty special relationship with Apple. And that's worked out very well. In fact, every couple years or so, there's been something new that we've been able to do on the Mac. And it's a great business for us. And
it's actually, the relationship between the Mac development team at Microsoft and Apple is a great relationship. It's one of our best developer relationships.